Hi, this is Ed back again with another video for all my supporters out there. Thank you to everyone on Patreon for supporting my channel and keeping it going, of course. Without you, this wouldn't be possible, and thank you to everyone on Steemit for those upvotes now and then. That also keeps my channel going. We're going to go into one of the strangest mysteries, at least historically to me, and this is regarding Rosslyn Chapel, since it has a secret that you might not have heard about even if you've read the Da Vinci Code. I'm going to try to go into some possible explanations here based on a lot of different things I've read, so let's just really get right into it. First, let's provide some context into secret societies and things like that. A lot of them stem, at least within Europe, which was imported into the United States and all number of Western countries outside Europe, stemmed from large organizations, one of which was the Knights Templar. Now, the Knights Templar goes right back to the 12th and 13th century. You might have heard a lot about them. There's a lot of conspiracies out there, also known as the Order of Solomon's Temple. That is their other name, etc. They were a bunch of crusaders, part of the Crusades themselves, also responsible for one of the first modern banking networks. At least the Knights Templar were responsible for that. So early there into banking. There's a lot of things that went back and forth, a lot of speculations as to what kind of gods they worshipped, if they changed gods or whatever when they were in the Middle East. Here's a letter from a crusader at the time saying, "As the next day dawned, they called loudly upon Baphomet, and we prayed silently in our hearts to God. Then we attacked and forced all of them outside the walls." So in this letter, he's talking about the Knights Templar there. Now, to be fair, there's objective ways to look at it. I've gone into Baphomet before in one direction. There is another direction to look at this in. Some scholars say that the word Baphomet from this area references Mahmud, which is a reference to Muhammad. So it's possible that some of the Knights Templar, while they're in the Middle East, started, an association with the Islamic religion. And that is one possible explanation there. Though there is a lot of confessions that came back after the Knights Templar were tortured. I'm not going to go into those because people that are tortured will say anything at all. Torture is not a way to extract information from people, so they will say anything. In fact, the Knights Templar themselves gave, commented on things in one direction and then commented on them in the other direction. They were just saying stuff. But as far as the letter that came before all this torture went on, after the Pope turned against the Knights Templar because they became incredibly wealthy and powerful with influence, running a banking mechanism, or one of the first established banking mechanisms in a wide network, all this torture and arrest began. So I won't go too far into that. But what did happen after the Knights Templar here in the 12th and 13th century were captured is a lot of them went into hiding. And so began the secret societies, or a lot of different secret societies. Of course, secret societies have been around forever. You're probably aware of secret societies in India, including the Black Hand. I believe that's name was an assassin's guild. And these types of things, obviously, there were around the world, but a lot of European secret societies, some of the most dominant surviving today, actually stemmed from the origins of the Knights Templar. And when all of these people who had a lot of knowledge in banking, a lot of knowledge in martial combat, started to scatter to the four winds after their arrests. So then began this branching tree, all coming off the trunk of the tree itself, and to all these different strange iconographies and symbols you see all around. Here's a picture of Rosslyn Chapel in France, which maybe I'll save for another video. That itself is an hour video because it's so full of mystery. Some people stating it's the last resting place of the Holy Grail itself. I don't know if that's true. I believe the most likely resting place of something like that is somewhere we've never even thought of, but who knows. But in Scotland here, this is the chapel we're going to go into specifically, which has been featured in a lot of popular media, including the Da Vinci Code and things like that. It's called Rosslyn Chapel. It is a 15th century chapel with a lot of the different carvings, I believe, round about that time, or at least the time of construction. So 15th century is very, very early, of course. When you're talking about the 19th century, most people forget, you're talking about the 1800s. So the 15th century is like the 1400s. Okay, so just keep and bear that one in mind. Here's the inner workings of Rosslyn Chapel, which has a number of mysteries about it. One of the biggest mysteries is what seems to be some kind of cryptographic code within a lot of the different carvings themselves and stonework. So you can see here, you can see a lot of these things here. Now, there's two things that are a bit esoteric, okay, and I tried to find imagery of them, but it was very hard on the internet, so you just have to trust me on this one. But you see these square things here with these square things with flowers in the middle. You'll see those around the US Capitol inside the buildings as well. In fact, I believe they're mentioned in a documentary called Riddles in Stone. So you might want to reference that documentary, which is about 3 hours, etc. You could take a look at that. And this is known as Rosicrucian symbolism. In fact, this whole church, which is called Rosslyn Chapel, is a Rosicrucian church. Okay, it's a Rosicrucian chapel itself. So, just putting that out there. So here are just some more carvings of the strange inner workings. Looks quite beautiful. It was a master, absolute master craftsman who obviously spent all this time carving this out of bare stone. There's no doubt about that. Here is the first Earl of Rosslyn Chapel. Now this is long after it was actually built, okay, and this person got made an Earl. Okay, so this is in the 17th century here, or 1700s, the 18th century, dying there in the early 19th century. Okay, so this individual was one of the first earls. So at this stage, the chapel's already hundreds of years old. Interestingly enough, this person's crest here, as you can see here, or their bunch of their iconography they use, is a two-headed eagle. That's important to remember a bit later. And you can see on the shield here, you can see these roses themselves, and this classic archway, which is a measure of Freemasonry. The double-headed eagle itself is also Masonic, or in this dating back to all these mystic schools derived from the Knights Templar, is actually this is the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. So this is a very established chapel there. In fact, this double-headed eagle, and I've got a screenshot of it later, is actually the sign of the 32 and 32nd degree. So there's a very high up symbolism here of this chapel. But it's also all of this Rosicrucian symbolism as well. Now you might have heard about this in popular media, such as the Da Vinci Code or Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which was a 1980s book, which was very famous before the Da Vinci Code came out. These are, of course, the Holy Blood, Holy Grail is a non-fiction work. The Da Vinci Code is, of course, a work of fiction, where they depict that the Holy Grail was actually the Merovingian bloodline descending from Mary Magdalene and Christ there. So I can't pronounce that last. Mary Magdalene, okay. Descending from Mary Magdalene there and Christ. Now, that is pretty wild kind of tale, but it makes good story, and obviously the Da Vinci Code did well with that. But I don't think that's really the secret of Rosslyn Chapel myself. The real secret of Rosslyn Chapel comes back to something which researchers have touched on before me, okay, and this is in regarding to the Grand Plan, or what is referred to as the New World Order. The Grand Plan itself, or the Grand Design, was for a new world. Okay, the starting of these individuals coming together in these consolidated secret societies in order to work for a plan, in order to design a new society in the image that they wanted it to be designed in. Now, there's a little clue in this in regards to Francis Bacon here in their book, and Francis Bacon was a Rosicrucian. Okay, he was some people say he was heavily influenced in founding the new movement of Rosicrucianism there, and that he was key in that, or the founding member itself. Of course, you've got to remember these secret societies change their names over time, so depending upon when you look at it. He wrote a book called The New Atlantis, and it might provide some clues as to what the mindset of these secret societies was thinking about. Now, The New Atlantis is a novel about a kind of new society being built, a utopian society with some good ideas in it, okay? When the Constitution of the United States was, influenced heavily by Freemasonry, no one's going to say that the ideas in it were bad, okay? The idea of the right to defend yourself, freedom of the press, these are utopian ideas. Or ideas of liberty, of the importance of the individual instead of the importance of the king or queen to rule over an assortment of individuals. But even the ideas you can see in Francis Bacon's work here, and he's famous for more than this novel. Actually, he's probably one of the most famous people from history to ever live, right up there with William Shakespeare. Some people think he is William Shakespeare, although that's a different type of conspiracy. He was talking about Solomon's house here, okay? The plan and organization of his ideal college, Solomon's house, okay? Envisioned the modern research university in both applied and pure sciences. A lot of the things he talked about in the New Atlantis actually came to pass, and actually there were these buildings built in honor of the ideas. There is no understating how famous this work is for those people that are very influential. And not entirely for bad reasons, okay? The idea of a science institution, all these things are wonderful ideas. I'm not saying Francis Bacon was plotting for the end of the world. Remember this, there are many mystic societies. There are many secret societies. There are some secret societies that are very bad. Very, very bad. And then there's other ones that are trying to design a better world. Now, of course, they become corrupted over the ages. That's just what happens with everything. But the initial ideas behind this with Francis Bacon, if you read into it, weren't necessarily bad, okay? And he's talking about Solomon's house here. He's using a lot of these things referencing the Middle East, again stemming from this Templar-esque thread that goes down these these secret societies in Europe. Remember the Knights Templars themselves, because the Knights of Solomon, okay, because the Solomon's Temple. The story about Knights Templar is interesting because they said that they found something interesting underneath the Temple of Solomon that changed them altogether. Some people say that was mathematics or advanced mathematics, which were later passed on to the stonemasons, who then, coming back from the Middle East, were able to build cathedrals using this new advanced mathematics, which came out of the ending point of the Islamic Golden Age. Okay, so that's something to think about there. Now, Solomon's Temple, or Solomon's house, was actually built. There is actually photographs of it at the time. It was a real building. Okay, and there are some old photographs you can find online, again showing the influence of Francis Bacon and his ideas about this new Atlantis, this new world to be built. Okay, the new world, the new Atlantis, the reimagining and construction of Plato's Atlantis there, or at least when he referred to Atlantis itself, the idea of this new world, which would be built where? In the Americas. That's where the design was. So what does this have to do with everything, you might ask? I might ask as well. Well, there are many secret societies. Some of the secret societies I would classify as evil. Very, very evil people and very evil organizations. But there are many. And some of the ones that started off with maybe benevolent ideas back in the 1400s or 15th century turned very ominous as of today. And that's what happens. You cannot survive through the ages and expect these ideas to not be bent and twisted. I'm not saying any of these people are, because I don't know, I'm not a 33-degree Freemason. I've never even stepped into a Masonic lodge in my life. Okay, so I can't tell you, you know, what the higher echelons are thinking, and even normal Freemasons in the lodge wouldn't be able to tell you what the echelons are thinking. Most Masonic lodges might have their main focus in, you know, having banquets and trying to raise money for charity, but no one knows what the top echelons are thinking. So it's hard to say, and of course there's many of these mystic societies, but the main focus of the New Atlantis was the Americas. And what part of land was unoccupied, or at least it was occupied in part, but it wasn't as occupied as perhaps other places like Mexico. Well, that was sweeping parts of the United States. Now here we come to something interesting, because I stepped quite a distance away from Rosslyn Chapel, which of course is symbolic as the 33, basically the temple of the Scottish Rite there, or at least in their cryptographic symbolisms they have in the historical temples. It's not used like that today. It's corn. And this is one of the secrets. This is the secret of Rosslyn Chapel. And this is why it's related to Francis Bacon and all these ideas about the New Atlantis. Again, you're going to have to go out and do other research mechanisms in order to link this together. But you can probably do that quite easily in regards to Francis Bacon. Now, this is about corn here. Now, corn, of course, was discovered in the Americas. And I want to reference this right here. When they're talking about corn in the Bible, they're not talking about corn in America. What they're talking about in the King James Bible, which predated, you know, Columbus, etc., and the New World, is they're talking about a coarse grain of wheat or maize and things like this. So corn, when it came back from the Americas, is named after a very coarse grain. So the actual corn on a cob was not found until, you know, long after all the word usage in the Bible. So if people come back and say, well, corn is in the Bible, I just want to address this. If you go to Rosslyn Chapel, and this is their website, which is, you know, is published by the family trust there, I guess you could say, of Rosslyn Chapel, run by the Earl of Rosslyn and the family there, the 7th Earl. Maize. Surrounding a window are carvings of maize or Indian corn. This is in Rosslyn Chapel. The presence of this plant carving in the chapel raises many questions. Not only is it an exotic plant, but it originates from North America, a country traditionally thought to have been discovered by Columbus in 1492, almost 50 years after Rosslyn Chapel was built. So how did Rosslyn Chapel know about corn before it was built? And again, this isn't like a conspiracy. You can see it literally on the walls there. In fact, in this here, sorry I don't have a blown up version, there is corn on the cob all around the windowsill right there. So that's interesting, because it's likely that the people who constructed Rosslyn Chapel, i.e. the secret societies, knew about the Americas long before it was discovered by Columbus. Okay, and that's an outrageous statement, but it is possible itself. And these are other, what they state, pictures of different kinds of plants. Some people say this is corn, but this isn't as clear as in the other picture, if you can find that and blow that up. To me, this is kind of like a plant-like thing, but who knows. What I think has happened, and this is wild speculation, is that the money pit, if you've heard of that and you've been following that itself, was a precursor to all of this discovery. In fact, if you go back to ancient times, the Americas and places like that, apart from the the native people there knowing about the places, as far as Europe goes, have been discovered before, at least I believe, in regards to the money pit. Now, the money pit is in Nova Scotia on Oak Island, if you don't know what it is, and it's a very strange pit which looks like this, and it has a number of these wooden planks, and it was air trapped. So they found it, someone was digging and found these planks, and they found that when they went down a certain level, what happened is it broke the air trap and it flooded the channels. Some people believe that the money pit itself has some kind of treasure inside, but who really knows? The main thing about this is there's a lot of cues within the building of the money pit of advanced, an advanced education behind it. Possibly some kind of what you'd get of, a crew that was pretty educated in regards to how to flood chambers, how to block off chambers, even how to dig it was very complex indeed. So it's possible that some explorers went to Oak Island or different places in the Americas, and in essence what happened is they couldn't get back, so they buried what they had in the money pit itself. In fact, in the United States, in some places, I think it's the United States, there are Viking settlements that have been recorded, okay? So there are numerous people that visited these places. Now, where do I think that the secret societies knew about the Americas and corn beforehand? I'll tell you where. Manuscripts. I think that they had access to a number of manuscripts and hidden knowledge that no one else did. Maybe even from the Templars. Who knows through the ages? Right now, the Vatican, which we shouldn't confuse with the Rosicrucians, which are completely different, have literally a mile of archives which they've never opened up to the public. We live in the peasant world, not the upper echelons where this secret information is shared. Of course, it's obvious that the United States was founded by Freemasons. You have through the National Archive here, I believe this is a picture from the National Archive, but there are many of George Washington in his Masonic uniform. And I'm not saying he was a bad person or something like that or anything like that. He was a Freemason, as were a number of the people behind the idea of the New World, okay? And the Constitution of the United States is a very important document. In fact, the United States is a very lucky country for having a constitution, okay? So these are the people that gave the United States a constitution itself with this idea. Now, what does all this mean, okay? When you go to the all-seeing eye, well, really it's about order out of chaos that is creating this new world itself, creating this type of new order. Now, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Well, it's probably a pretty bad thing. The reason why is you cannot create a new order without taking away the rights of other people. And there lays the problem in terms of all of this, is that this new world order is carved out by destroying other people's lives. Okay, pressuring people to do certain things, causing wars overseas. The grand design mentioned by these secret societies is being put in place by force now. That's completely different than the initial ideas coming out of the Rosicrucians, or at least parts of those societies. And I'm not saying I agree with everything they say, and I'm not saying I'm associated with that or reading it. I'm just talking about, in a non-biased sense, those ideas themselves may have been good ideas to them in the beginning. Most people would have said, sure, we'd love a utopia. Then it became corrupted. And now it's ultra corrupt. So why do you say that the Rosicrucians share the same symbolisms of Freemasonry, apart from Rosslyn Chapel, pretty much being associated with the 33-degree Scottish Rite there of Freemasonry. Well, of course, the symbols are very similar. Okay, obelisks, you know, pyramids themselves. I don't have any photos here, but if you type in Rosicrucian pyramid, you get thousands of pictures of pyramids on graves and all these types of things. All the symbology and iconography cross-pollinates because they're all offsprings or associations with each other. And like I said, the symbolism of the Earl himself, the Rosicrucian there, and the Freemasonry T-square there, is a symbol, as you can see here, of the 33-degree Scottish Rite. That is the double eagle. We flick back there for a second, the double eagle itself, etc. So Rosslyn Chapel has this secret history connected with these mystic schools. Okay, so what about today? This is hundreds of years old. I mean, the declaration of, you know, and you know, all these types of things are dating back to the late 18th century there, in regards to the United States, the Declaration of Independence, you know, those types of things. They're all dating back to those types of times, and then Rosslyn Chapel was hundreds of years earlier than that. Well, today we have this, okay? It's everywhere now, and these aren't even the same secret societies. These are off-breaks of them. This is a Jehovah's Witness Center. It's just a big massive triangle with an eye on it. Okay, in Denmark, this was recently posted on Reddit Conspiracy. Here's another one. It's everywhere. It's part of the administration. Now, here's the original. This is an original miniature of what Canberra Parliament would be. This here is there on purpose. So everyone could look at this and say, what does that mean? Well, they probably need to ask the question. That's Canberra Parliament in Sydney, which I've done... Sorry, in Canberra, which I've done numerous videos about, obviously. And I believe this is must be just a piece of fishing wire with some light through it or something. But if you go up to here, and I've done all the videos, there's a giant pyramid on top of the rooftop. I mean, it's just full of Masonic symbolism itself. Of course, there's Washington, D.C., and the big giant owl on the top, as you can see there. I don't even know if these are the same mystic schools, because Rosicrucianism shares a lot of a symbolism with Freemasonry. In case of Rosslyn Chapel, it seems that they're almost one and the same, kind of. There are many of these different mystic schools now, and no one even knows what they're doing or what they're up to. But I don't think they're up to anything good, because the world is in chaos, of course. It's just all broken. There's endless wars. Everyone, all they always say, we're going to install a new world order, or it's part of the new world order. Well, what order is that? So where does the idea, hundreds of years ago, of a utopian society, you know, a place of learning, how does that stack up with the modern idea of this twisted grand design that's come through the ages into the abomination it is now? The abomination of suffering, endless death, a design where you can't speak anymore. Remember what the even the founding fathers of the United States in the Declaration of Independence saying they shouldn't impede the press in any way, shape or form. Well, they arrested Julian Assange on some quasi-trumped up charge. You can't even say certain words anymore. The Scottish Rite, Rosslyn Chapel, the idea of a utopian society. Scotland, Count Dankula arrested for telling a joke. You see, because it's not the same. Even the ideas, whether you like them hundreds of years ago or not, they are not the same ideas as they are today. Today they are an abomination of whatever threads of good ideas were in those ideas has now turned into an abomination. And it's just chaos now. Anyway, I just thought I'd go into that. I thought people might be interested in there in the connection with Corn and Rosslyn Chapel and the idea of the Americas and the grand design, which was the construction of you know, a new world in the Americas itself. I recommend seeing a documentary called Riddles in Stone. Incredibly fascinating. Very old documentary, but very good one. It goes into some of the things I talked about there, but in a lot more depth, okay? I don't think they talk about Rosslyn Chapel, though. They do talk about the grand design, but it's more in forms of democracy which is imported from the ancient Greek society. You know, things like that. In the meantime, go and do your own research, decide for yourselves. Of course, thank you so much for your support on Patreon, and I wouldn't be able to do this without you. So let me know if you have any questions in the description. I'd love to read them there. In the meantime, stay safe. Thank you, and I'll see you all later.